and giving me an opportunity to respond to some of those statements. Listening to all of the testimony today, there's certainly been some positive contributions to the debate on general aviation, but there have also been some highly negative statements about CASA, some possibly valid, but some that have to be contested because I would argue that they are wildly inaccurate. And I will go through a couple of those when I have an opportunity to do so. It's also a bit disappointing that listening to some of the testimony that many matters are made to sound contemporary when they are in fact not contemporary. I'll give you an example. The transition from the decision not to go with Part 145 and transition to EASA regulations, which was discussed earlier today, was made in 2005, Senator. It wasn't made last week. It wasn't a change in policy that I made. It wasn't a horse jump. It was a very, very long time ago. And the implication that comes from some of these statements is that we're changing horse midstream. And I think that some of the statements that I've heard today reflect that. Also, I would say that in terms of the regulatory development program that we've been running, which we will no doubt get to today. Sorry, there's a bit of noise that I can't really, bit of background noise, thank you. The regulatory development program began with the transfer to the Civil Aviation Safety Authority in 1995. Between 2000 and 2010, the consultative framework delivered about 22 regulations. Another 6 regulations were delivered between 2010 and 2016. A number of the people who spoke today were involved in that process from the outset, and they still might be a bit unhappy with the outcome, but they were involved in the consultation for 15 years. Since 2016, I created the Aviation Safety Advisory Panel, and within 3 years we completed the remaining 11 regulations, and they have been made. They were all consulted. They were all consulted under the technical working groups. And some people have made the point that the last 3 to 4 years there has been increased consultation. So those regulations have been made, they have been consulted, and we have made a significant improvement. The regulation program of the 55 regulations are now made. And the implication in some of the documents that the discussions that it's still rolling on, I find a little disingenuous. Senator, returning to a couple of facts that were just made, and I think I will try and deal with them very briefly because I know that you're short of time and you've had a long day. Mr Buckley, clearly we disagree with Mr Buckley. There's no doubt about that. Mr Buckley made the point that he'd spoken to the CASA chair had ignored him. The CASA chair met face-to-face with Mr Buckley to go through these issues, a fact that he conveniently omits. In terms of industry complaints, he's dealt with the Industry Complaints Commissioner many times, and there are other complaint mechanisms. His information has been with the Commonwealth Ombudsman for some time. That is the next avenue to appeal. And the allegations that I have misled the Ombudsman, or the CASA has misled the Ombudsman, I find offensive. The Ombudsman asked us for every bit of correspondence that's been dealt with by Mr Buckley for the last 5 years. We provided 40 gigabytes of data, over 20,000 files to the Ombudsman, who's been reviewing them, and the Ombudsman matter is still going on. Its case is not concluded. I object strongly and personally to the allegations that I have misled the committee. I have not, and I'm quite happy to stand by my record. I also note a lot of comments that Mr Buckley made, and I'll move on to a couple of others, but I would make the point, and I can back this up. Mr Buckley indicated that the transition from one team to another was the beginning of the change. A number of senators have referred to that. I won't refer to the team leader's name, who has since left the organisation. What I will tell you is that the team leader applied repeatedly from 2015 to 2018 to be removed from the supervision of Mr Buckley's case because he felt that his team was wilting under the demands and behaviours of Mr Buckley, and he felt that his team was captured. So he went to his supervisor and asked that Mr Buckley's matter be allocated to another team. And it was allocated to another team, and it was looked at a lot harder. Now, the fact is that Mr Buckley will say that he had a very pleasant journey with CASA employees over a number of years designing his future. The CASA employees didn't quite see it that way. And the CASA employees got to the end of that process and felt that they were not delivering the right outcome, and they asked to be removed from that. Mr Buckley, as you've probably noticed, and you'll notice my emotion in this, has harassed my staff and continues to do so under P-Prune and just about every other website. He makes unsubstantiated allegations, and I'm quite happy to deal with them. He has assaulted my staff. He has stalked my staff in the Melbourne office, and frankly, we've had enough of him. So the matter is with the Ombudsman, and I'm very, very happy for the matter to stay with the Ombudsman and get resolved. But I will not accept that. I will not accept the allegations that are made. And I'll make one more point on Mr Buckley. Essentially, what Mr Buckley has been asked to do is one thing: to deliver a legal document between him and his franchisees or his subordinates or whatever he calls them, that clearly outlines who has the safety responsibility and supervisory responsibility. Put it in a clearly defined legal document that we will accept, and we would be comfortable with the business model. I'll stop Mr Buckley at that point, because clearly he's been told this many times and we're in a very different place, Senator, a couple of other points, if I may, only really briefly. Some of the points that have been made today I think are very, very positive. I listened to Mr McDermott Aviation. I thought had some very interesting things to say. I note they have a unique business model, but it's an interesting business model, and we try to accommodate it, but it's a different business model because Mr McDermott primarily operates foreign registered aircraft, as he told you, and brings them into Australia. The oversight requirement for the foreign aircraft is by the foreign operator, Senator, so it's kind of handy. He has a business model that operates globally within registered aircraft. It's a good business model and it makes him a lot of money, but it's very different than lots of other business models here, and we have to jump through a lot of hoops to accommodate that, and we've done our best. He mentioned in his submission that he had a lot of outstanding jobs. I went through the outstanding jobs and found that more than 70% of his 60 jobs had been completed within 30 days. I'm quite happy to put that evidence on the record, but I think as a whole his submission was very positive, and I welcome it. I was very disappointed with the AOPA discussion, and there are a couple of points that I must make about the decades of aviation medical abuse. In the last 12 months, Senator, we approved 25,000 aviation medicals and rejected 84. That is hardly systematic abuse. That's 84 rejections out of 25,000 applications. I object to the fact that we've thoroughly ignored him. We write back to him all the time. With regard to the points that he made, which I note the committee noted with interest, the young pilot accused of low flying, and it's not true. Well, that's not what the instruments on his aircraft say, Senator. They say he was at 125 feet. So I have to get into the specifics of this individual case, unless you want to flog it out. We don't have time for that. No, Senator, I don't. I wanted to make he raised 3 points. Please continue progressing. Yeah, pardon? I'm sorry, Senator, I missed that. Please continue progressing without getting into it. We will run out of time, which would be unfortunate. Thank you, it would be. So there is a different side to that story. The AAT fellow, if it's the same one we refer to, is a person who's failed multiple flying tests and is back in the AAT, and his licence is going to be reissued, is subject to him passing a test, and he has not. And the third matter relating to the aircraft registration, it concerns me that point is made when that company misrepresented the aircraft when they introduced it into Australia. It's a self-declaration, and we caught them. I would also say that the legal representative for that company is actually on the AOPA board, something that does not get mentioned. So we get the issue raised, but disingenuously, not completely. There were a range of other elements that I covered. The reg program, as I said, is pretty much complete. There are lots of other issues, I think, related to pilot qualifications. Some are raised by the 4A's Association. I did note that they said, because I wrote it down amongst other things, that matters have improved considerably over the last 4 to 5 years, which I thought was helpful. And there's been some minor changes to Part 61 in the last 6 months, and there's a very extensive working group trying to change Part 61. Part 61 was a regulation that was implemented well before I arrived in CASA, Senator, and we're doing our best to modify it. And there was some discussion on Part 138. I might stop it there, Senator. I know that we're very short of time, and I know that you want to ask some questions, and I'd welcome the opportunity to respond, and I have some officers here if I find that I am out of my technical depth.